Hey everyone, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes to do a video talking about outlines. Now, for your graded speeches, the outlines are one of the most important things that you can assemble for the speech. It basically gives you a direction for what you want to talk about and shows me what you've researched for the speech. So I want to give you an example of a good outline, and we're also going to take a look at an example of an outline that's not so good. Let's take a look at a good outline first, and you'll see it here on the screen. This outline is actually on D2L. You'll see it in the content section, in the informative speech subsection. It's titled Sample Outline. It's the New Age Movement outline. So let's start at the very top. You'll see this outline has a title. A title isn't required. A lot of people have one. You can have one or not. It's completely up to you. But at the top of the outline, you'll also see three things. You'll see a general purpose, which is always two words, either to inform or to persuade. You'll see a specific purpose, which begins with the same 5 words: to inform my audience about, or to inform my audience of. So it'll always begin to inform my audience. And then your central idea statement, which is essentially your thesis statement for your speech, what you're going to be talking about, what your main points are going to consist of. Those 3 things are always at the top of every outline you give me in class. Then what I'm going to want you to do after the central idea statement is I'm going to want you to label your introduction. Same thing I'm going to want you to do with the body of the speech, right before your first main point and right before the conclusion. I'm actually going to want you to label those 3 sections of the speech for me. And what that does, that just not only tells me where one part of the speech ends and another part of the speech begins, but it also serves to remind you as well. And let's scroll down to this student's introduction. And you can see she has a paragraph. She devotes an entire paragraph to the introduction, and that's what I'm going to want. I'm going to want you to write out the paragraph in advance. Please do not write a partial introduction and just freestyle the rest. I'm going to want you to think about the parts of the introduction that we've talked about in class. I'm going to want to see those parts of the introduction when I look at your outline. Right? Do you get people's attention? Do you state your topic? Do you establish your credibility? Do you reveal your main points? Those are the 4 things I'm going to be looking for in every introduction. Make sure you write it out in your outline, or you type it out in your outline. After the introduction is finished, you'll have a transition statement. Transitions don't have to be complex with me. A transition statement can be something as simple as, now that I've talked about X, now I'd like to talk about Y. The transition statement here is, the first element I would like to discuss is the concept of reincarnation. And that's fine. So have the transition statement. Also make sure you label the word transition. Transition, then your statement. So just like you're going to label the introduction, body, and the conclusion, I'm going to want you to label each transition statement. And you'll have a transition statement between every main point of your outline, except right before the conclusion, and we'll look at an example of that in a second. We'll have a label, the body, right before the first main point. And in our first main point, we'll talk about reincarnation. A couple of things about the body of the speech. First off, remember it's going to be in outline form, not in essay form or paragraph form. Right, so you'll have Roman numerals, letters, numbers. That's what I'm going to be looking for. A second thing to keep in mind is I'm going to want full sentences in your outline. Not fragments, not one word. Not one word. So, for example, Roman numeral 1, reincarnation, would not work for a main point. Right? So make sure, let me clear this out. So make sure it's a complete sentence. Now, I'm going to want, when I look at your outline, I'm going to be looking for complete sentences in the main point and in the subpoint. Now, if you go to the subpoint, this is like the A1, A2, A3 right here, I'll be a little more lenient about fragments and one word, and having one or two words. I'll be a little bit more lenient in your subpoints. But for your main points and your subpoints, your Roman numeral points and your lettered subpoints, I'm going to want complete sentences. The last thing that I'm going to be looking for in the body of the speech is for you to actually state your sources. State your sources. Just like you would cite sources in an essay or in a paper, I'm going to want you to state your sources or cite your sources in the outline. How this person chose to do it is they actually chose to write the source citation into the outline. And if I were doing speeches, if I were doing this assignment, this is what I would do. And this person wrote, according to Dick Suffin in his 1990 book entitled You Were Born Again to Be Together, the chief purpose of this process of birth and rebirth is education. And again, you don't need to have a direct quote. I paraphrased part of his book, and that's fine, as long as you cite author, date, title of the book. That's perfectly acceptable. If you want to cite it like you do in a paper, you can do that as well. But just if you do that, make sure you also cite it when you deliver the speech as well, because I'm going to want it in both places. So it not only has to be cited in the outline, but I'm going to want you to state it when you speak. Okay, so let's go down. This looks good. A lot of things. The format looks good. Roman numerals, letters, numbers. Okay, so we're finished with the first main point. We're to another transition. So they have the transition label. Now that I've discussed reincarnation, let me turn to my second main point, ESP. So they go to the second main point. And once again, they cite a book, a 1991 book entitled Your Mysterious Powers of ESP. And that's fine. It's perfectly acceptable. And where you cite sources in the outline really doesn't matter to me. This person chose to cite theirs in their main point. You can do that. That's perfectly fine. You can also cite it in a subpoint as well. That'll be fine. That's fine as well. One thing to remember, and let me go back up to the first main point, is in this first main point, the student cited a book, Suffin's book, and they cited the full author, full name of the author, the date, and the title. And that's the first time they mentioned that author and that book. Later in their B subpoint, they just mentioned the last name of the author. Suffin argues in his book that karma is the main driving force behind reincarnation. And once again, that's perfectly acceptable. If you already mentioned the name of an author, it's okay to mention her or his last name or the title of the book. Just like in a paper it's okay to do, it's fine here as well. So let's scroll down the outline. The outline looks good. We'll have another transition statement right before our third main point, where they chose to cite another source. And it looks like we're wrapping up and we're going to the conclusion, and that's where we are now. You notice right before the conclusion there is no transition. That's because the transition is naturally built into the conclusion when you signal the end. So, right before our paragraph for the conclusion, we label the conclusion, we write conclusion, and then we signal to the audience that we're ending the speech. Just like the introduction, I'm going to want the conclusion written out in full. There are 3 things I'm going to want to see in a conclusion: signaling the end, restate and reinforce the central idea, and refer to the introduction in some way. Those are the 3 things I'm going to be wanting in a conclusion. So make sure you write it out. Last thing is the bibliography. The style cited here is APA style, but you can cite it in MLA or Chicago, whatever you want, as long as you're consistent. It can be on the bottom of your outline, it can be on a separate sheet, whatever you want, but it has to be there. Make sure you turn in your outline with a bibliography. Every semester there are at least anywhere 2 to 4 people who turn in an outline with no bibliography. They forget it in their printers, or they forget to do it. Happens every semester. Don't be one of those people. Make sure you turn in your bibliography with your outline. So this is an example of a very, very good outline. I wrote on D2L, this is an example of an A outline. If you want an A, model your outline after this. So this is a very good outline. Let's go to our other outline. And you can see that it's way shorter. Let's start from the bottom up. Let's see, even though May 7th, 1984, I'm not sure if this is a part of the outline or the conclusion. It's not really labeled, so it's not really clear for me. If it is part of the conclusion, it's getting complete, doesn't signal the end. Doesn't really tell me what the speech is about. It's not really clear. So the speech only has one main point. For all speeches in class, you should have at least 2 main points. All speeches. Most speeches have 3 main points. For any speech you do in class, you really don't need any more than 5 main points for the speech. Now this speech does have 1. They do cite a New York Times article. I don't know what the date of the article was. It doesn't say. I don't know who was the author of the article. But it does cite a source, so that's good, but there's no bibliography, so there's really nothing to match that with. There's really no transitions. It does have full sentences. Kinda, sort of. But, it's a good starter outline. It looks like an outline that was incomplete, but this was actually turned in. Also, there's no introduction. There's no purposes at the very top. There's no general purpose, specific purpose, central idea. So you can take a look at really what I'm going to be looking for in your outlines. I'm going to be looking for format. I'm going to be looking for certain elements in the outline. I'm going to be looking for source citation in the outline.